INFJs don't fall for damaged people by accident. They fall for them because something deep inside them recognizes the wound and mistakes the recognition for destiny. Think about the people you have loved most intensely in your life. The ones who got all the way in. The ones who produced the kind of feeling that did not behave like ordinary attraction. It felt like recognition, like inevitability. Like you found something you had been looking for without knowing you were looking. Now think about what those people had in common. Not their appearance, not their profession, not the surface things, the deeper pattern. Because for most INFJs, when they look honestly at the people they have loved most completely, there is a thread running through all of them. Something unresolved, something they were carrying, a wound that had not healed, a story that had not finished, a version of themselves that had not yet arrived. And the INFJ, who could see all of it with precision, was drawn to it like it was the most natural thing in the world. This is not a coincidence. It is not bad luck. It is not a series of isolated poor choices. It is a pattern, a specific, identifiable, deeply rooted pattern that connects directly to how the INFJ is wired, how the INFJ learned to relate to people, and what the INFJ has unconsciously been taught to associate with love. And until that pattern is named clearly, not softened, not reframed as sensitivity or empathy, but named for exactly what it is and where it comes from, it will keep running. In the next relationship, and the one after that, and the one after that. Here is the thing that makes this so hard for INFJs to see. The attraction does not feel like a pattern. It feels like a choice. It feels like love. It feels like depth and recognition, and the specific relief of finally being around someone who matches the intensity you have been carrying alone. Every single time. The pattern disguises itself as the real thing so effectively that the INFJ is usually deep inside the relationship before any part of them starts to question whether what they felt at the beginning was genuine connection or a very familiar wound calling to a wound they did not know they had. If this channel has been describing your life in ways nothing else has, subscribe, because this is exactly what we do here. Let's get into it. The wound recognition system. Why damaged people feel like home. The INFJ nervous system is built to detect pain in other people, not as a skill they developed, as a function they were born with, and that was reinforced through every environment they moved through. From early in life, the INFJ learned to read the emotional states of the people around them with precision. They tracked who was struggling, who was hiding something, who needed something they were not asking for. This was not a choice. It was survival. In many cases, reading the emotional state of the people in their environment was how the INFJ knew how to behave, how to stay safe, how to be what was needed to keep the peace or keep the connection. What this training produced, over years of repeated use, is a nervous system that is extraordinarily attuned to emotional pain in other people. The INFJ does not just notice when someone is wounded. They feel the wound. It registers in their body as something real, something that has weight, something that creates an instinctive pull toward the person carrying it. And here is where the pattern begins, because that pull, that visceral, embodied response to someone else's pain, is experienced by the INFJ as connection, as depth, as the feeling of being with someone who is real, who is not performing, who has something genuine underneath the surface. And depth and reality are exactly what the INFJ is hungry for. So the attraction to the wounded person does not feel like a warning. It feels like recognition. It feels like finally. It feels like this person is not like everyone else. And in one sense, they are not. They are carrying something visible and real. But visible and real pain is not the same as the kind of depth the INFJ actually needs to be sustained by a relationship. The wound recognition system was built to help the INFJ navigate difficult environments. It was not built to select romantic partners, and using it as a selection mechanism, which happens automatically, not consciously, means the INFJ keeps choosing people whose primary distinguishing feature is that they are hurting, not that they are deep, not that they are capable of the reciprocal intimacy the INFJ needs, just that they are in pain. And pain, however real, is not a foundation for the kind of love the INFJ is actually looking for, the helper identity. when loving someone becomes fixing someone. Most INFJs, if they are honest, can identify a period in their life, sometimes their entire life, where their sense of value in a relationship was tied directly to being needed, not loved for who they are, needed for what they can do, for the insight they provide, the stability they offer, the specific ability they have to hold someone's pain and reflect it back in a way that helps the person understand themselves better. Being needed in this way feels like purpose, and for the INFJ, purpose and love are deeply connected. This creates a specific dynamic in romantic relationships. The INFJ enters a relationship with a wounded person and, almost without deciding to, takes on a role. They become the stable one, the understanding one, the one who sees the other person clearly and loves them anyway, including the parts the other person cannot yet love about themselves. This role feels meaningful. It feels like the INFJ is contributing something real, something only they could provide, something the relationship genuinely needs. What it also does is establish the entire structure of the relationship around the other person's healing. The INFJ's energy, attention, and emotional labor go toward helping the other person move through their wound. The INFJ's own needs, for depth of reciprocation, for being known and reached in return, for a love that is not organized entirely around what they can give, become secondary. Not because anyone decided that, just because the structure of the relationship does not have room for the INFJ to also need something. There is already a designated needer, and the INFJ is the designated giver. The INFJ often does not notice this imbalance for a long time, because giving feels natural to them, because the role of helper is familiar and comfortable in a way that being cared for is not, because the meaning they derive from supporting someone through difficulty is real. It is not performed, it genuinely matters to them. But meaning is not the same as mutuality. And a relationship that is meaningful to the INFJ but not mutual is a relationship that will eventually cost the INFJ everything they have, while returning something that looks like love but functions more like dependency. The childhood blueprint, where the pattern was actually written. This is the layer that most INFJs resist looking at, not because it is not true, but because seeing it clearly requires looking at something that happened before they had any tools to understand it, or any choice about how to respond to it. The attraction to damaged people did not begin in adulthood. It began in whatever environment the INFJ grew up in, and in that environment, somewhere, love and difficulty were connected in a way that left a mark. For many INFJs, early experiences of love involved emotional labor, a parent who needed managing, a family system where the INFJ's role was to be the sensitive one, the one who picked up on what others were feeling, who mediated tension, who sacrificed their own needs to maintain the emotional stability of the people around them. Or an environment where love was inconsistent, where it arrived in full force sometimes and disappeared without warning other times, and the INFJ learned to work for it, to earn it, to make themselves indispensable as a strategy for keeping it. What gets written in those early environments is a template, a deeply encoded set of associations about what love looks like, what it requires, and what kind of person is worth loving. And the template does not stay in childhood. It travels. It shows up in every significant relationship the INFJ enters. It recognizes familiar patterns, the inconsistency, the need, the emotional labor, the work of earning and keeping love, and registers them as comfortable, as known, as the shape love is supposed to have. This is called a relational blueprint, and it operates completely below the level of conscious choice. The INFJ is not selecting damaged partners because they decided to. They are selecting them because the nervous system learned to associate that specific combination of qualities: intensity, need, inconsistency, the feeling of being necessary, with love. And the nervous system moves toward what it recognizes as love, even when the conscious mind knows clearly that what it is moving toward is going to hurt. Rewriting the blueprint is the deepest work. It does not happen through insight alone, though insight is where it starts. It happens through sustained, repeated experience of a different kind of love. And that experience only becomes available when the INFJ stops walking into the rooms where the old blueprint feels at home. The intensity addiction. Why healthy love feels boring at first. This is something most INFJs know experientially but almost never say out loud. Healthy love, stable, consistent, reciprocal, drama-free love, often feels flat at the beginning. Not bad, not wrong, just somehow less than what the INFJ expected. Less vivid, less urgent, less alive. And because it feels less alive, a part of the INFJ questions whether it is real, whether the feeling is deep enough, whether this is actually love or just something comfortable that is masquerading as love, because the INFJ is tired of getting hurt. This is the intensity addiction, and it is one of the most consistent and most damaging features of the INFJ's romantic pattern. After years of relationships organized around emotional turbulence, around the highs of deep connection, followed by the lows of withdrawal or inconsistency, or the constant effort of loving someone through their own damage, the INFJ's nervous system has calibrated to that level of stimulation as the baseline for what love feels like. The turbulence is not just familiar, it is what love feels like from the inside, and its absence feels like something is missing. The person who is stable, who shows up consistently, who does not create cycles of intensity and withdrawal, they do not produce the feeling the INFJ has learned to associate with falling in love. The INFJ is attracted to them, appreciates them, can see with their analytical mind that this person is good and real and worth choosing. But the felt sense of love, the visceral, embodied certainty that this is the right person, does not arrive in the same way it arrived with the damaged people. And the INFJ, trusting feeling over analysis, starts to doubt the relationship. What is actually happening is that the body is responding to the absence of a stress response as the absence of love. The nervous system, trained on intensity, reads calm as emptiness, consistency as flatness, safety as something slightly suspicious. This is not a reflection of the relationship's quality. It is a reflection of what the INFJ's nervous system learned to expect from love. And that learning, however real its effects, was never accurate. It was the product of an environment, not the truth about love. Recognizing the difference is the beginning of being able to stay in something good without needing it to hurt to feel real. The savior trap. Why the INFJ keeps believing this time will be different. Every INFJ who has lived this pattern knows the specific internal experience of the moment when the red flags appear, the inconsistency, the withdrawal, the behavior that does not match the words, the early signs of the wound operating in the relationship in ways that are going to cost someone, and the INFJ already knows who it is going to cost. They see it. With the same precision they see everything. They see it clearly, and they stay anyway, not because they are blind, not because they are weak, but because the INFJ's perception does not just see what is, it sees what could be. The potential version of this person, the healed version, the version that exists on the other side of the wound the INFJ can see so clearly, that version is real to the INFJ. As real as the current version, more real sometimes, and the INFJ makes a decision, conscious or not, that their love, their insight, their specific capacity for holding someone through difficulty might be the thing that bridges the gap between who this person is and who they could be. This is the savior trap, and it is built directly from the INFJ's greatest strength, the ability to see potential, turned into a mechanism for staying in relationships that the evidence has already evaluated clearly. The INFJ is not deluded. They know the current reality is not working, but they also genuinely believe in the potential, and the belief in potential for the INFJ carries moral weight. Walking away from someone you believe in feels like abandonment, like giving up on someone at exactly the moment they most needed someone to stay. The truth that breaks this trap is the one the INFJ already knows but does not want to apply here. Potential is not a promise. Seeing someone's best version does not create an obligation to wait for it indefinitely. And the most honest thing the INFJ can do, for themselves and for the person they are trying to save, is recognize that the saving was never theirs to do. Growth belongs to the person growing. Love can witness it, love can support it, but love cannot do it on someone else's behalf. And love that tries to will eventually disappear in the attempt. What the INFJ is actually looking for and has been mistaking damaged people for. Underneath every version of this pattern is a real need, a legitimate, understandable, deeply human need that the INFJ has been trying to meet through a mechanism that was never capable of meeting it. And until that need is named accurately, the pattern will keep finding new faces to wear. What the INFJ is actually looking for is depth. Real, mutual, sustained depth. The kind of connection where both people are operating at full interior, where nothing significant is hidden, where the conversation reaches the level of what is actually true, rather than what is comfortable to say, where being known is not a risk because it has been demonstrated to be safe. That is the thing. That is what has been driving the pattern from the beginning. The problem is that depth and damage can look identical in the early stages of a relationship. The wounded person carries something real and unresolved, and real and unresolved has a texture that resembles depth. The conversations go somewhere. The emotional register is high. The connection feels significant because it is engaging something real in the INFJ's system. But what the INFJ is engaging with is not the other person's depth, it is their wound. And wounds, however real, are not the same as depth. A wound is something that happened to someone. Depth is something someone has built through genuine self-examination, genuine growth, genuine willingness to be in honest contact with their own interior. The INFJ who learns to distinguish between wound and depth, in practice, not just in theory, in the actual felt experience of early relationship, stops making the same trade. Not because they become less compassionate. They do not. But because they become clearer about what they are actually looking for and what they are not willing to substitute for it anymore. Depth in another person looks like this. They are curious about you without needing anything from you. They can hold difficulty without it destabilizing them. They have done real work on themselves and can show you the evidence of it in how they behave under pressure. They do not need you to save them. They need you to be real with them. That is the person the INFJ was always looking for. That is the person worth waiting for. How to actually break the cycle. Not in theory, in practice. Every INFJ who has recognized this pattern has also at some point tried to break it through willpower, through deciding to choose differently, through telling themselves that the next time they feel that specific pull, that recognition, that intensity, that feeling of this person is carrying something real, they will notice it and step back. And then the next person arrives and the pull is exactly as strong as it always was, and the decision dissolves before it was ever really tested. Willpower is not how this cycle breaks. Insight is not how this cycle breaks. Understanding the pattern intellectually, including everything in this video, is not sufficient on its own. The pattern lives in the nervous system, not in the analytical mind. And changing something that lives in the nervous system requires working at the level of the nervous system, through experience, through the body, through repeated exposure to new data that slowly rewrites what love is supposed to feel like. The first practical step is building the capacity to tolerate the flatness. When stable, healthy love arrives and the intensity is not there, instead of reading that as a signal that this is not the right person, treat it as a signal that this is new territory. Stay. Let the feeling develop without the turbulence. Let the nervous system learn through actual experience that love without chaos is still love. This takes time. It takes discomfort. It requires overriding a feeling that is genuinely strong with a decision that is genuinely difficult. But it builds new data, and new data is the only thing that actually changes what the body reaches for. The second step is getting honest about the early signs, not analyzing them away, not giving benefit of the doubt past what the evidence supports, not staying in the assessment phase longer than the data warrants. When the wound shows itself in behavior, in inconsistency, in taking without returning, in the dynamic starting to organize around their needs at the expense of yours, name it. To yourself first, and then decide based on what is actually happening, rather than what could happen if the potential were realized. The cycle breaks when the INFJ stops choosing the familiar over the real, when depth stops being something they give to people who need saving, and starts being something they require from people who want to stay. That shift from giving depth to requiring it is the whole work, and it starts exactly here. 7 layers of a pattern that has cost most INFJs more than they have ever said out loud. The attraction that feels like destiny. The helper role that felt like purpose. The childhood blueprint that wrote itself before you had a say. The intensity your nervous system learned to call love. The savior trap that kept you in rooms you should have left. The wound you kept mistaking for depth, and the actual work of breaking a cycle that was never about weakness. It was always about a nervous system doing its best with what it learned. You are not broken for having this pattern. You are not weak for having stayed too long. But you know now, and knowing changes the next decision. Even by 1 degree. Brainy Quiet Mind. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to see their own pattern clearly. One question for the comments. When you look at the people you have loved most completely, was it their depth that drew you in, or was it their wound? And when did you first realize the difference?